Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the inheritance in Java. So the inheritance. This inheritance is one of the four OOP principles. Okay. There are four OOP principles in Java and inheritance is one of them. And this inheritance, it is used for creating is relationship among the classes. Okay. When an is relationship exists between the objects, it means that the specialized object has the characteristics of the general object. Specialized object will be known as the child object, and it will have all the characteristics of the general object, which will be known as the parent. In other words, child will inherit from the parent. That's what is the relationship is about in Java. Okay. So this is a relationship. It can be created through the inheritance, which means the inheritance it allows one class to inherit all the variables and methods from another class. Okay. For example, suppose that those are the objects that you are planning to create: dog, cat, and fish. In order to create those objects, first of all, you need to have the classes for those objects. You need to have the dog class, you need to have cat class, and you need to have the fish class. Okay? And when you create the custom classes for those custom objects, you will have to specify the data members and also the methods. Okay? Because the class is going to specify what kind of methods, variables the object should have. Okay, so when you create those dog, cat, and fish classes, there are data members and attributes, and also the actions that you need to include. For example, in the dog class, cat class, fish class, in all of them, you need to include the variables like name, breed, size, weight. Okay, and we also need to include some methods like eat, okay, move. Those methods we need to include them as well in those objects. So the easiest way to create those variables in their classes would be through the inheritance. Okay, instead of creating one by one, we can just create it one time and then inherit to all those three classes. Okay, so therefore what we can do is we can create a class such as animal, which will act as the general class. Okay, and this animal class, it can contain all the common features that are needed for all those three classes that you want to create. So in this animal class, whatever the common features that are needed for all the other three classes, we will add them into animal class, and we will just create it one time. For example, doesn't matter if it's dog or cat or fish, whatever the animal it is, every single animal has name and breed and size, weight, and also have the eat method and move method. Okay, these are needed for every single animal. So therefore, once I create those variables and methods in one class, through the inheritance, I can inherit them to the other classes. So dog, cat, fish, those three classes, they do need those variables and methods. Since all the animals have certain characteristics, so therefore, we will inherit those certain characteristics to all the animal classes. Okay. And in addition, the subclasses can also add their unique characteristics. For example, dog, it can have its own method bark, unique method bark. And in this cat class, we can also add the unique method that is only for the cat, such as scratch. And same with the fish class as well. In the fish object, we can also add the unique method of fish, which is swim, compared to those dog and cat. And the reason I cannot add them into the parent class is because if I add them into the parent class, it will be inherited to all the child classes. For example, if I add this bark method in the animal class, in this general class, then this bark method will be inherited to the cat and the fish as well. Because inheritance means whatever the variables and methods that you have in the general class, it will be inherited to all the other classes. Okay. So once you inherit the animal class to the dog, to the cat, and to the fish class, that means there will be is relationship will be created between them. Okay. Once we have the is relationship, it indicates that those classes, dog, cat, and fish, those classes, they can have all the characteristics of the general class, which is the animal class. So all the variables and methods of animal class will be inherited to those classes that are inheriting them. We are going to talk about the super and subclasses. The super and subclasses, they can be created through the inheritance. Once the inheritance is applied, then the super and subclasses can be created. And the keyword that is used for inheritance is the extends keyword, which means to create the super and subclasses between relationships among the classes, we need to apply the extends keyword. Okay, and once the extends keyword is applied, then you will have super and subclasses. Okay, so for example, if the dog class is extending the animal class, once we apply the extends keyword, then the dog class will be inheriting from the animal class. This is known as inheritance. Okay, so all the characteristics of animal class will be inherited to the dog class. Okay, and here the dog class will become the child class and animal class will become the parent class. So whichever the class name is given, on the right side of this extends keyword is the parent class, and on the left side is the child class. Okay, so once the parent-child relationships are created, or it's also known as the super and sub. Sub means the child, super means the parent. Then parent class, all the variables and methods of parent class will be inherited to the child class. Okay, so this term is known as super and sub. Okay, this term is known as superclass and subclass, or we can also call it as parent class and child class. Okay, so dog extends animal, that makes this animal to be the super class or parent class, and that makes this dog to be the child class. Okay, and the inheritance. Once you apply once the super and subclass relationships are created, all the accessible variables and methods of the superclass will be inherited to the subclass. Okay, so once you create your animal class as the parent and it is being inherited to dog, cat, and cow, all those classes, then it means from the animal class all the accessible variables and methods will be inherited to the child classes, to the subclass in another word. Okay, and in the parent class, if there is any variable or methods were declared as private, then they cannot be inherited. Okay, because private is not accessible outside the class. In order to determine which variables and methods are accessible, it is determined based on the access modifier of that variable or method. If the access modifier is visible, then it can be inherited to the child classes. If it's not, then it cannot be inherited. So therefore, the private is not in the discussion of inheritance. It will never be inherited to any child class. Okay. And in addition to any variable or methods that are private, the constructors also cannot be inherited. Okay, constructor of the parent class, it cannot be inherited to the child class either. Because constructors, they are special method, and every single constructor, they must have the same name as the class name. Okay, so in this animal class, the constructor name must be animal. However, in those child classes, the constructor name must be same with its own class name. So therefore, parent class constructor cannot be exist in the child classes. However, you will be required to call the parent class's constructor. Okay, in the child class, we must call the parent class's constructor. That term we will learn it later on, how to call the parent class constructor. What happens if we don't call it? We will learn them very soon. So even though the constructors are not inherited, but the child class, it must call one of parent class's constructor. Okay, and in order to call the parent class's constructor, we will be needing the super keyword, and I explained super keyword in our next video. We are going to do practice with the inheritance. Suppose that you are required to create 3 custom classes, dog, cat, and fish. And these are the attributes and actions that you need to include in the dog, in the cat, and also in the fish class. Okay. So if you look at those 3 classes, the dog class, the cat class, and the fish class, they all have some common characteristics. Okay. All of them, they need to have the same attributes, and they also have to have some couple same methods in it. For example, eat, move, and toString. Those methods are needed not only for the fish class, but also needed for the cat and dog, those objects. Okay. So in this case, if I need to include all those variables and methods that are common for cat, fish, and dog classes, instead of creating them one by one, what I can do is I can apply the inheritance, which allows me to create it for one time, and then I can continue to use it in any other classes through the inheritance. Okay. So therefore, what we can do is we can create a class which is going to be the parent class. Okay, or it's also called the general class. Okay, so here we can create a class like animal, and then in this animal class I can include all the common characteristics of dog, cat, and fish. After that, I can just let this animal class to be inherited to dog, cat, and fish classes. So that way, dog, cat, fish, those classes, they can have all the variables and methods of the animal class. Okay. So in this animal class, when I create this animal class, since it's going to be the parent class, it should only contain the common features of all the classes. If any variable or method is not common for all the subclass that I'm about to have, then it should not be included in the parent class. Okay. So in this animal class now, I can add the attributes like name of the animal. Okay. And besides the name, we also need breed, size, age. Those attributes in the animal class as well. Age. And also, lastly, the size. For example, I can use string for the size as well. Okay, so those are the attributes that we added into the animal class. Later on, those attributes will be inherited to the other classes once we apply the extends keyword to the other classes. As long as the other class is extending animal, then they can have all those variables. That way, I don't have to declare those variables one by one in each of those 3 classes. And besides those variables, we also have some common methods that are needed in the dog, cat, and fish classes. So those common methods, we can also include it here. For example, the eat method. And when you create the method, you need to determine whether the method needs to be static or instance. For example, in the eat method, let's say I need to use the name of the animal. In that case, the method needs to be instance because this name variable is instance. If it is static, then it wouldn't accept this instance variable. So I can declare the remaining methods. For now, I will give this implementation to the method. Okay. And besides the eat, we also need the methods like drink. And in this method, I'm also going to use the instance variable. So therefore, I can make this method instance. Okay, drink method is not needed. So we need the eat, move, and toString, those methods in every single classes. So therefore, this method name, I can change it to move. Okay. And besides the move, we also need the method toString that is needed for every single classes, whether it's fish class, cat class, or dog class. So toString method, we can use this shortcut to generate it, which allows us to print the object whenever we pass the object in the print statement. Okay. So once you created those variables and methods, in the other classes, you don't have to create them. You can just inherit them. Okay. For example, once after finish creating this animal class, now it is going to be easier for me to work with the dog class. Okay. So therefore, in this dog class, I can let this dog class to extend the animal class. Okay. Once dog class extends the animal class, all those accessible variables and methods will be inherited to the dog class. So which means right now the dog class, it has the name, breed, age, size, eat, move, and toString. Those methods, those variables and methods. Okay. And this bark method, I also needed to have in the dog class. But I cannot add this, I cannot inherit this bark method from the animal because not every single animal does need this action. Okay. Not all the animals, they have this bark method, bark action. It is only unique for the dog. And in the inheritance, the subclasses, they are also allowed to add their own unique members, data members or actions. So if this action is only unique for the dog, then I can declare it in the dog class. Okay. And since this dog class inherited all those variables and methods from the parent class, that means this dog class right now, it also has its own name, breed, age, size, those variables. So therefore, here in this method, I can also call the instance variable name of the dog. Now this name that we are calling, it is the name of the dog. It's not for the animal. The dog class, it has its own name instance variable now. Okay. So you see, with the help of inheritance, we don't have to repeat those lines of codes over and over again. We can just have less codes in the subclasses. And in the cat class, I can also do the same. I can let this cat class to extend from the animal class. Once it extends the animal class, that means the cat, it is going to have all those instance variables and methods. Okay, it will be inherited to the cat. All those instance variables and methods of animal now is inherited to the cat. And in addition, the cat, it needs to have this additional method, which cannot be inherited from the animal. Because this method is not needed for every single animal. That's why I cannot place it in the animal class. So therefore, now what I can do is I can let this cat class to add its own unique method, which is scratch. And then I can include the name of the cat because cat, it has its own instance variable name. Because you inherited means those instance variables now are also the members of this object. Okay. So now I have all those attributes and actions that I wanted to add into the cat class. Now cat class, it has all of them. Even though we only created this one method, but the rest of the variables and methods are inherited from the parent class animal. And lastly, for the fish class, we can do the same. We can let this fish class to extend the animal class so that the fish becomes the subclass or the child, and animal becomes the parent class. Okay. And the fish class, it will have all those attributes plus those 3 actions. In addition, I also need this action in the fish class as well. And it is only unique for the fish, not for all the animals, only for the fish. So therefore now I can let this fish class to add its own method, which is swim. Okay. So this is how we can create those subclasses easily through the inheritance. And when you create the object from dog or cat or fish, now each of those objects, they do have the name, breed, age, size, eat method, move method, and the toString. Okay. In addition, each of those objects, they also have their own unique methods now. For example, in the dog, we have bark method. In the cat, we have scratch. And in the fish class, we do have swim. So this is the inheritance.